played 1 year of high school basketball, sat the bench that 1 year that I was playing. I scored 2 points a game in high school, my senior year. My last high school game was, I was 18. I started playing pro when I was 23.
Today, I'm joined by Dre Baldwin. Known for his brand, Work on Your Game, we translate athletic tools to business and professional success.
One of the things that has really separated me from a lot of athletes, Adam, is that many athletes, they don't have to be salespeople or marketers because they can just be so good at the sport that everybody else does the selling for them. Whereas I wasn't that good. So I had to be my own salesperson, my own marketer.
Sometimes it's hard to stay motivated internally, but the idea of just filming yourself, filming your internal game tapes and reviewing them and maybe putting them on YouTube or clipping them up now, especially nowadays, is potentially a really valuable way to keep yourself accountable.
I only put it on YouTube not to show off. I was not trying to build a brand or be an influencer. I just put it up there just for safekeeping, and then random people started finding it. And that's when I said, oh, well, I work out every day anyway. And I'll start recording myself, and then I'll just throw videos on YouTube. I could tell by about 2008, I said, this is going to be something. This internet thing is going to be bigger than basketball for me, because I understood I can't play basketball forever, but I can be on the internet forever.
Dre, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Adam, how you doing?
I'm good, really good. Hot, a little bit sweaty in New York. Got to turn the air conditioners off so we can have good audio. So, but I'm excited to chat to you. So
we're professional with this. Turn the air conditioner off.
You gotta. It's all about the audio, bro. It's all about the audio. I wanted to take a moment to just say I was really, really impressed with how you got in touch with me. I've never experienced that before, and it was really, really solid. Just for the listeners, what I got was an email from Dre's assistant with a unlisted YouTube video specifically addressed to me, clearly with some research that was done on the podcast and the alignment of why you should come on the podcast. And I've never seen that before. And I really, really liked it. It showed a moment of just like effort that you don't get very often. And I sent it to my editor and I was like, look at this, he's great. This guy's a legend. I'm going to get him on. Just no question. I didn't even do much research on it. I was like, I like this so much that I'm just going to get you on the podcast. And then funnily enough, my editor says to me, oh, I know that guy. He used to do his basketball drills when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so who's your editor? What's your editor's name?
His name's Joe Fowler.
Hey, Joe. Well, I'm glad we came full circle here.
So good. Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Love it. So, of course. So if you could give an elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and how you're contributing to the world, what would that sound like?
What I do very simply is I have this brand called Work on Your Game. And what we do is we extract the tools to help athletes get to the top of the sports world. And we translate those tools over to the business and professional world to help people perform at their highest level, do so consistently, and produce results.
Great. Nice. Very succinct. I like it. That's the best elevator pitch we've had so far. It's usually a 10-minute monologue.
Really this is really what I do. I'm not telling anything.
You nailed it. And what's the context of your early years that allow us to understand you as a human? Because the early years shape us. They make us into who we are and the decisions we make. And I think it's really important to kind of dig into what happened, why it happened, because it allows for context to be provided for the future decisions and who you are now, so that listeners might be able to actually really, truly understand.
Sure. So background is I come from the city of Philadelphia. Growing up, I was always into sports and played a little bit of everything, tried everything that I could try where I come from. Where I come from, people play a little bit of football. There's some baseball. Went to a couple tennis camps. Never did any water sports, really. Never did any ice sports, but those sports I did. Finally stumbled across basketball around age 14, which is pretty late if you're trying to go somewhere in the sport, like professional or college. But that was the situation. Played 1 year of high school basketball, sat the bench that 1 year that I was playing. I tell people, I scored 2 points a game in high school, my senior year. So I tell people that if you play hockey or what's the other sport? Soccer. You score 2 points a game, you're in the Hall of Fame. But in basketball, you score 2 points a game, you're nobody. So I went to walk on to play college ball at a Division III college, which is the third tier of college sports, not a level that produces pro athletes. And that is from there. Well, that's when I started to translate into adulthood. So I don't know if that's enough context for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you began your basketball career that led to professional. Fast forward a little bit, it led to playing professionally, but you began at the end of high school, not really doing much. So, who were you in that moment in time, and how were you navigating the world versus who you were when you got drafted to play professionally and you got into the professional league, and how were you operating in the world then?
Yeah, so it was only 5 years apart. So my last high school game was, I was 18. I started playing pro when I was 23. And who was I then at 18? I was dumb enough to keep believing that I should keep trying to play basketball. Really, because there was nothing in my reality that said this guy should keep trying to play basketball. I mean, 2 points a game as a senior, that means you're not very good. And I started late, so I understood that I was what we call a late bloomer. So I could feel that I was still getting better. I could feel that my game was still developing, whereas a lot of kids by that age, let's take my son, he's 2 years old. So if I introduce him to basketball, he'll get introduced at a very young age. So by the time he's 18, he will have kind of realized whether he has potential to keep going or not. It's going to be very clear. If he can't play, it's going to be obvious. All right, it's over. All right, when he's 18. Yeah. When I was 18, it was not obvious because I'd only had 4 or 5 years under my belt. So I could still feel I was getting better. So I was dumb enough to keep believing that and keep going. I didn't have, of course, you got your high school classmates and stuff saying, well, you didn't do anything, you didn't play. But other than that, it's not like I had anybody like really pushing me to not keep playing. There was nobody telling me not to do it. So I figured, okay, I'll go to college, and whatever school I go to, because of course I wasn't going there for basketball. Wherever I go, I'll just try to get on the basketball team. So I just happened to be at a school that happened to be at Division III. This is just luck. I didn't go there because it was Division III. I went there because I was going to school. And I just said, whatever school I go to, I'll just try to get on the basketball team. And I happened to go to that place, and I was able to get on the team there. Not a big fish. I was a medium fish in a small pond. So I was able to kind of develop more of my game, develop more confidence, and get better. So by the time I was 23, that's when I started playing pro. And I'm playing overseas, so there's no draft. You just get signed. So they just sign you. So when I started playing pro at 23, I had my game had filled out more because I had that 4 years of college under my belt. I was continuing to get better, continuing to work on my game. I finally started lifting weights and working on my body. I had never done that, but before I got to college. And my confidence as far as playing was very high at that point, Adam, but I hadn't proven anything yet as far as can I play pro? Because the only thing you can prove to play pro is you have to actually play pro. And to play pro, it goes back to what we talked about when you asked about the 3 key things people need to understand in the short episode we did. And I said, you got to be able to sell yourself. Just because you have game doesn't mean anything if you can't get it out there. Right? Because it's like if I write a great book, if I don't sell any copies of my book, it doesn't matter how good the book is because nobody read it. Right? So I still had to sell myself to get there. So what I started to understand at that point, and I'm sure we'll get into this in this conversation, was that I needed to be a marketer and a salesperson as well as being an athlete. And this is one of the things that along the years has really separated me from a lot of athletes, Adam, is that many athletes, when they're good enough, they don't have to be salespeople or marketers because they can just be so good at the sport that everybody else does the selling for them. Like LeBron James doesn't have to be a salesperson because he's so damn good on the court. There's a bunch of other people who will line up to do all the selling of LeBron for LeBron. All he has to do is the basketball part, whereas I wasn't that good. So I had to not only be good, but also had to sell myself because it's not like it was a bunch of people calling me saying, hey, Dre, you're so good, I'll do the selling for you. I didn't have that. So I had to be my own salesperson, my own marketer, which actually ended up serving me in the long run because when it was time for me to transition out of sports, which I'm sure we'll get to this, I already had all this marketing and sales experience in my back pocket. So that's who I was.
Okay. What was your, out of curiosity, what was your family dynamic like to potentially have that confidence and support around going for what you wanted to do in the athletic field, if any?
Sure. Well, growing up, 2 parents at home, mother and father still together to this day. I had one sister. She's a year older than me. My parents they didn't care about sports advancement. They didn't care about making their kids into athletes. Their big thing was you're going to go to school and graduate from high school, go to college and get a college degree because neither of my parents at that point had a degree. So my mother and father they were in their early 20s when they had both kids. My sister's only a year older than me. There's only 2 of us. So my dad never even tried to go to college. So I remember when my sister and I became old enough to understand middle school, high school, college, that there were levels to elevate, we would ask my dad, what school did you go to? And he would say, or what college did you go to? He would say, the school of hard knocks. That was his answer. So he never even considered college. And that's how it was for a lot of people where I come from, at least in his era. Whereas my mom was actually in college when she had her kids. And I remember being a young, very young, like, who knows, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And my mom would go to school. She went to LaSalle University, which is this college in Philadelphia, and not far from where we grew up. And she would go to night classes, and she would take my sister and I with her to the campus to go to her class. And I remember me and my sister sitting outside on a bench outside of the classroom while my mom was in the classroom. And she would tell us, just sit there. And she tried to do that maybe for a semester, and she realized, I can't do this. So she put her college plans on hold so that she could raise her kids. And her big thing, and my mom was really the decision maker. She kind of made all the decisions for the kids. My dad supported it, but she was really in charge. She was just big on education, education, education. The good thing is my sister's older than me, so I think my sister took the brunt of that. And my sister became a super high performing student. I was a good student, but I wasn't a super high performing. I was a good enough student. My sister was spectacular. So she went and got all the advanced degrees. My sister basically became everything my mom would have been if she didn't have kids. So my sister went to the best high school in the city, went to an Ivy League college on scholarship. Then she got all the stuff you can get after you graduate from college. She got all of it. So I don't even know what they are. Law degree, PhD, master's. She has all of those. And she's a college professor. So she's like perfect. If you're talking about climbing the academic ladder, she climbed it to the top.
That's it.
Yeah, she did everything.
Nice.
And that's because of my mom's influence. Because again, I believe my mom would have did all of that my sister did if me and her weren't around. So I came after my sister. So again, since my sister was doing so well, I kind of drafted off of her so I could kind of be okay. So I was an okay student, did good enough. Went to a good high school, not the best one. Went to a good college, not the best one. Graduated, and I knew I didn't want to go to school ever again. So I graduated C average, 2.6. As they say in sports, C's get degrees. So that's how I got out of college. And I knew I was moving on to something else. So that was my home dynamic. I didn't even answer your question. So when it comes to being an athlete, my dad is into sports. My mom doesn't know anything about sports, but my dad is into sports, meaning he would watch, and he watched the games and go to the games every now and then. And he would play when he was younger. And he coached like youth baseball when I was a kid. That's one of the reasons I played baseball, not because I was good, because my dad was a coach. And they support it. Okay, you want to go play basketball, but make sure you're getting good grades. You get bad grades, you're off the basketball team. Like how parents would do like that. So that was the dynamic. They didn't know anything about playing pro basketball or getting recruited to play in college. They didn't know anything about that. That was all on my own volition. And I'm glad you asked this question. I finally got to this point because these days, what I tell a lot of athletes, and even in you mentioned your editor knew me from my basketball drills back in the days. I would get a lot of athletes coming to me, and actually wouldn't be the athletes, it would be the parents would come to me and say, hey, my son is good and he might want to play in college. Can you give me some information, et cetera? And I would reply to the parents like, well, if your son wants to play in college and he's 16, why are you emailing me? Yeah. Why did your son email me? Because I personally, for me to get on and play in college, my parents weren't doing anything. My parents didn't drive me to an AAU tournament. I never had a trainer. I never played AAU. I never played any kind of club ball. I never played any type of sport where the parents had to pay for you to participate. Not one, not a single dollar. So when I see athletes having their parents taking more initiative to help their careers than they're taking to help themselves, that always bothered me. What are you doing? Are you serious about this? So that definitely shapes a big part of my worldview. And I'm sure this will come up again, that if you're serious about doing something, you need to do it on your own volition.
Yeah. Internally motivated as opposed to externally motivated. Yeah. That makes sense. You made a point about being really good at sales and marketing, but also another point that like the LeBron James of the world can just focus on the skill. Is there value in trying to focus on the skill from your experience on being so good at that one skill that the skill carries everything else? Or is that unreasonable for the non-LeBron James of the world?
I think it's both. I think there is value in doing that. And if you can hit that lottery, then absolutely do it. I always tell people, I wish I could have had that experience. I wouldn't be who I am today. We wouldn't be having this conversation had I had a different experience. Like, had I been so good at sports that I could have went that route where the coaches and the scouts are knocking down my door and my parents are taking calls from all the coaches. Coach K is calling my phone and all of that. Had that happened, I would have had a whole different experience in life had I been that talented. So again, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
I mean, we might have been having this conversation. We still could have the conversation.
Right. But it'd be
just a different conversation. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I always wonder what it would have been had it been that way. But usually when you're that young, we're talking about somebody who's, maybe Brown got recognized when he was like in 9th grade. So when you're that young, you're not thinking that way. And most of the people around you don't understand that. And these days you got parents trying to force their kids into stuff that they're not even that good at. So I don't think you have a chance to think about it until you can look back. It's kind of like that Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford that he gave many years ago, that you can't really connect the dots so you look backwards. You can't connect them looking forward. So, and the other question was, what was the other part of your question?
Is it unreasonable of an expectation or a standard to try and just focus purely on being so good at a skill, even if, is it luck? Is it good, what's the word I'm looking for? Good genes, or is it focused work from a very young age towards like a very key point?
So it depends on what we're talking about specifically, because I have to make sure we separate sports out from everything else. Because sports
why don't we start with sports and then go with business? Okay. Maybe we could do both.
Okay. So sports is a special category. And I always want to make sure I add this disclaimer in when I talk about these things, because to be a professional athlete, you need a certain genetic code that you cannot work for. Right? My mom is 5 feet, maybe 6. My dad is maybe 5'7". My dad is like 5'8", 5'9". I'm 6'4". I didn't work for that. That was just luck. That was lucky genetics. Had I been the average between my mom and my dad, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be having a different conversation, because I wouldn't have been a basketball player, no matter how hard I worked. So there's a certain genetics you have to have, and that puts you above a certain line to where you're only competing with people who are above this line. To play basketball, I was only competing with people at this level and above. And no matter how hard you work, if you're down here and you're 5'2", you're not competing against me. So that's one thing.
Unless you're Nate Robinson.
That's just Nate Robinson, right? And the fact that you can name him is the exact point. The exception proves the rule. And then Spud Webb and Muggsy Bogues. That's it.
There's like 3 of them.
Right, exactly. 3 people in the whole world. So, and in the business world, it's different, because anybody can be successful in business. Not anybody can become an NBA player. No matter how hard you work, anybody can be a successful author or podcaster if they want to, if they're willing to put the time in. So when it comes to something like what we're doing here, being a podcaster, a speaker, an author, a coach, something like that, yes, there is an angle through which you can get so good at the thing that you're doing, that maybe you may not need to be that much of a salesperson once you hit the critical mass. So you familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's book called The Tipping Point?
I haven't read it, but I know the general concept.
So the general concept is, once you hit a certain point of market saturation and people know your name, now you don't have to sell yourself as much, because they're calling you. Now you're taking on incoming calls. So you think of I'm thinking of someone like Tony Robbins. All right, Tony Robbins doesn't go and make calls and say, hey, I'm a motivational speaker, come have me at your conference. All right, they call him. All right, and he decides which ones he wants to take. All right, you get what I'm saying? Whereas someone like me, if I want to speak at a conference, I got to call them. At least for now, I do. Hopefully I get to the point where they're calling me. So there is a point of that. At the same time, as an entrepreneur, we also have to come back to the principle that your ability to sell the thing is more important than your ability to do the thing. So for me, let's just keep it with speaking, for example, I don't need to get any better at speaking on a stage. I don't need to develop any more skills speaking on the stage. That doesn't mean I'm the best in the world, but I don't need to get any better at it. If I want to make more money speaking, it's not because I became a better speaker. It's not because I got a better speech, Adam. It's because I got better at selling myself, marketing myself, and getting my name in front of the right people who can make the decision. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer my question. It's an interesting point you're making. So let me think about how I want to frame this for a second. You think the bar for business to be a successful business person is lower than the bar to be a successful athlete is?
Absolutely.
Is that much lower?
Yes.
So are there the Olympics of business, do you think? And what would, from your experience or understanding of, the two pillars of elite athleticism and elite business, what would translate across to the two?
Great question. So first of all, the reason that the bar is lower is because anybody can be a good business person. Not anybody can be a good athlete. Now, you need certain genetics to be good.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, there's a bar. There's a barrier to entry to being an athlete at the pro level. In the business world, there is no barrier to entry. I mean, there's a whole bunch of clowns out here who are successful, quote unquote, in business. All right, in what they're doing. If we mean success by audience and money, all right, you don't have to have talent to be good in business. So, but in sports, you do. So, if we're talking the Olympics of business, it's funny that you say that because just like the real Olympics, they'd be very corrupt. All right, it'd be extremely corrupt because
it corrupts.
Corrupt. The Olympics of business, first of all, not everybody gets to the Olympics, right? So you have to win your spot in the Olympics to even compete, right? So who decides who gets into the business Olympics?
The gatekeepers.
Yeah, exactly. So you already got corruption. So as soon as you have that, you have corruption. Whereas in the sports world, it is performance based. If you are a good player, they will find you in sports. In the business world, you can be good and be a nobody your whole career. That does not happen in sports.
So to be an elite sports person, elite business person, you need to network well and market well because you don't have to be that good at the individual skills. The bar for the skills is low, but the bar for the ability to network and the ability to market are high.
Yes. I'll give you two answers here. So first of all, let me add on to my previous answer. In the sports world, you can still sometimes not get your full opportunity. So for example, I used to play basketball, but I go to the boxing gym now, as I mentioned. Now, my boxing trainer, he used to be a boxer. He knows the boxing world. He has real fighters who he trains. And he tells me all the time, like, there are fighters out there who are really good, but because the way the boxing is set up, there's corruption because boxing doesn't have this straight up and down system like the NBA does. In the NBA, if you're a good player, they're going to find the best players for the Miami Heat, right? And the New York Knicks cannot duck and dodge playing against the Miami Heat because the schedule comes out, you have to play the Miami Heat 4 times. You can't avoid the game. Whereas in boxing, you can avoid that fighter that you think might not be a good fit for you. You can avoid them their whole career, right?
Yeah.
If you want to. And that fighter who's really good, but he isn't connected with the right people, he may never get his shot. So even in sports, sometimes that happens, depending on what sports you pick. So the sports that are straight up and down, basketball, football, baseball, hockey, where it's teams and there's a schedule and you don't have a say, there's no politics in it, then you can get a fair shot. But you take a sport like boxing, for example, there can be a lot of corruption in that. And my trainer, he talks about it all the time. So I just wanted to add that in. And so my other piece is the answer to your question is business comes down to 3 things. So first thing I tell people is sports is the ultimate meritocracy. It's the closest thing to a meritocracy you're ever going to find, where everything is based on your level of performance for the most part. Whereas the business world is not a meritocracy at all, even though many people think it is. It is not. Business is a strategocracy. I made that word up. That's whoever has the best strategy. Is a politocracy, whoever has the best politics. And it's a systemocracy, whoever has the best system. That's how you succeed in business. Strategy, politics, and system.
I like it. That's a good framework to understand the whole concept.
Yes.
Nice. I want to jump back a little bit because you mentioned, you were doing you got into at 23, you became professional. You started creating content around 2005. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that content has done really well. My editor, who's from a small town in Australia, knew you from that. So what inspired you to kind of start working on online content in 2005? And what made you want to do those topics? Because you did quite a few different things. And how did that impact you now?
Yeah, so I got to give you context here. So I'll tell you this first, and then I'll go back to the story. So my first 5 years making content was all basketball content, just on the court, showing people how to play basketball, practice basketball. So where that came from was graduated from college. Told you I went to a Division III college and I signed a contract 2005 to play pro. There's a gap there that I'm leaving out of the story. So I'll fill that gap in. So to come from a Division III college is not like I had professional scouts coming to my games because the team that I played for in the school I went to, nobody goes pro. So nobody was looking for me or anybody else. So when I got out of college, I knew I wanted to keep playing. I believed I was good enough to do so. But again, no opportunity. So like I told you earlier, have game, know what game you're in, have game, create opportunity. I had to do the third step. So I had a teammate who knew some people who had played professional basketball overseas, outside of the USA. So when I say overseas, I mean outside of the USA. And he knew that, okay, if you want to play overseas and people don't know you, you go to these events. There are these events called exposure camps. You familiar with those, Adam? Ever heard of them?
I get the concept. I've not really heard of much of them in any specific detail, though. So go on.
Okay, so they're more common now, but that 20 years ago, they were just starting to become a thing. Exposure camp's like a job fair, but for athletes. So you, instead of going there, shaking hands and handing out resumes, you actually bring your sneakers and your shorts and you play whatever sport and you try to prove that you're good enough to play pro. That's essentially really how it works. What'd you say?
Sounds really fun.
If you're watching, there's a lot of pressure and anxiety if you're trying to play because this is your one shot. Because mind you, these are all
you only get one shot. You can't do more than one exposure camp.
You can go to more than one, but here's the issue. Let me tell you the issues. There's a couple things. That's a great question. First of all, these camps are not free. All right, so you're spending your own money to play. And mind you, most of the people going to these exposure camps are players who are not playing pro. So where's the money coming from? All right, you're not making any because you're not playing pro. So you either borrowing it from somebody, or you got a job or something. But here's the thing. If you're trying to play professional basketball and competing against guys who play pro full time, you're working full time to have money. So it's kind of like you're burning the candle at both ends. You're trying to make it as a pro against pro guys, but you don't even have the amount of time that they have to work on your game like they do. So it's like you're in quicksand. Do you get what I'm saying? You have this very small window and you got to pay for it. So if you don't have any money, how are you going to pay for it? So first exposure camp I went to, this is in 2005. I graduated 2004. So my first year out of college, I worked at Foot Locker as a assistant manager. And I worked at this gym called Valley Total Fitness, which is no longer in business. You probably never heard of them. I don't know if you heard of them, Adam. Yes.
So out of curiosity, what were you making during that time?
At Foot Locker?
Well, we're doing both of those things.
Well, they were two separate jobs, 6 months apiece.
Oh, two separate. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So at Foot Locker, I was working full time. My check every 2 weeks was, $300 to $500, something like that.
How much was the camp?
$250.
Okay, so it's a week's worth of earnings.
Yeah,
more. Nearly 2 weeks worth of earnings.
Yeah, exactly. So the good thing is when I worked at Valley, it was more commission. So if I was a really good salesperson, I was a top salesperson. So I was making a little bit more money. That. Right. So then the commission check will come in like every month. And I remember going to my boss and negotiating with him to get the weekend off because the camp was in Orlando, Florida, which is 15, 17 hours from Philly driving. And we were going to drive.
Yeah. You drove?
Yes, we drove. Me and two of my teammates from college who also had pro ambitions. We drove together. We rented a car and drove. I negotiated with my boss to get the weekend off because in retail, you don't get the weekend off. Nobody gets the weekend off in retail. You have to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You usually work 2 of those 3 days. So you had to negotiate to get the days off. And I told my boss, I will make up for the missed days when I get back. And I literally did work for like 21 straight days after I came back to make up for it. And it wasn't because he needed me to put the hours in. He wasn't being a slave driver. It was because I was his top salesperson. So he didn't want me to not be there because I was producing sales and making him look good. But the reason why, and the reason I'm sharing this for a reason, the reason why he was willing to give me those days off is because he and I had some conversations where I told him about my ambitions. I want to be a pro basketball player. I'm not just going to be a membership salesperson. He was into motorcycle customization, this guy. His name was Steve. And to this day, he has his own motorcycle customization business. He got out of Valley and I got out of Valley. So I think he just saw a little bit of kindred spirit in me that I wanted to do something outside of where we were. Whereas a lot of people we worked with, they weren't going anywhere. They were just going to do that or something similar for the rest of their lives. But anyway, I get the weekend off, drive through. I had to go up to the Valley, as a matter of fact, and wait for the check to come because I needed that money to pay at the door, $250 in cash. And I had to reach out to the event before we got there and say, hey, can I pay you in cash at the door? Because I don't have a bank account, so I can't write you a check, and I don't have a credit card, so I can't pay online. And they said, yeah, you can pay in cash. Now, come to find out, they would have took anybody's money, no matter how you came up with it. I didn't know that then. But anyway, they let me pay in cash, so I paid in cash at the door. 2-day camp. And again, this is your only shot. I played pretty well at the camp. And the footage from that camp was on this thing called a VHS tape. Do you remember VHS tapes, Adam? Okay, so the VHS tape I understood you could drop that in the water, leave it in the sun, it's destroyed. I took it to an audio-visual store. They put it on a data CD. That footage is what I put on YouTube. So that's how I got on YouTube in 2005. I only put it on YouTube not to show off. I was not trying to build a brand or be an influencer.
Just to host it.
Yeah, these phrases didn't exist. Yeah, I was just put it up there just for safekeeping. And then random people started finding it. And that's when I said, oh, well, I work out every day anyway. By this point, I had this cheap little camera. It was a little $100 camera. I said, all right, why don't I just bring this to the gym and I'll start recording myself and then I'll just throw videos on YouTube, which I did sporadically for about 3-4 years. So that's how I got started.
Nice. And how did that content play into your outcomes as a sports person positively and potentially negatively?
Well, there was no negative from it, but on the court, it was great because it gave me a reason to keep practicing the way that I was so much. I practiced every day already, but now that I knew, all right, somebody's going to see this, it was kind of like you're performing, even though it was just for a camera at that time. And it was a small audience. And again, I had nobody knew that all of this was coming, what we have nowadays. Nobody knew this was coming. But I was just putting the videos out, again, sporadically, like once a month, every 6 weeks, whenever I felt like it. But my audience was growing online. And I could tell these was just random basketball players. They didn't know me. They were just going to the internet looking for help. And I just happened to be there. Nobody knew Dre Baldwin. They were just looking for basketball help, and I happened to be offering it. So that's how it started. And again, I started to build this reputation as, this guy works out every day and puts out videos. Well, it wasn't every day. This guy puts out videos to help us. It didn't become every day until about 2009. But at that point, I started to build an audience of people who were watching me. And I could tell by about 2008, I said, this is going to be something. This internet thing is going to be bigger than basketball for me because I understood I can't play basketball forever, but I can be on the internet forever. So that's where those seeds started to get planted in my mind.
Interesting. Okay. I like it. It's cool to hear the development of these threads that turn into pretty significant things. So thank you for sharing all of that. You made a point before that you were filming yourself, so it added another gear of potential effort because you knew so people would see it. Now, you've spoken about a concept called Super You.
Yeah.
Run me through what that is to begin with, and then I'll follow up with the next question.
Well, the Super You is unlocking and living with your highest level of confidence. So it's all about you being you, but the best version of yourself. So it's really about, if you need to, borrowing confidence from someone who's already producing at the level or performing at the level that you want to be at. And it's about creating that image of yourself at your highest level and living up to that image, or competing against it, if you will, that image of being at the best version of you at all times. So it starts out as something you have to consciously think about. And if you do it consistently enough, the subconscious mind takes over and it becomes a normal habit. Okay.
So with the filming of your workouts, was that in a loose way potentially the accrued development of your Super You? Because you said to yourself, this camera is looking at me. It's still only kind of me, but I need to show up as my best self for this camera. But it's also part of your internal control locus and your internal wheelhouse of things you can do.
It's an interesting question. I haven't been asked that before. I wasn't thinking about it in that way, Adam, but it definitely could have been, because I think human beings in general tend to be a little bit more cognizant of what we're doing when we know somebody's watching us. We tend to be a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more focused when we know we're being observed. So that probably has something to do with it, but I wasn't thinking about it in that way because I had already developed this kind of this mental armor, so to speak, when it comes to the confidence, just to get through playing in college and then to get into the point of playing pro. By the time I got pro and made it, it was like I had already embodied everything the Super U was about, because look where I came from, look where I'm at. I'd already surpassed everybody who I played with at that point just by getting my first opportunity to play pro. So I was already living it at that point.
That makes sense. The reason why I say it is sometimes it's hard to stay motivated internally, but the idea of just filming yourself, filming your internal game tapes and reviewing them and maybe putting them on YouTube or clipping them up now, especially nowadays, is potentially a really valuable way to keep yourself accountable, but in your own control. Like, you are kind of keeping yourself accountable through the third party metric of your camera. And then you can review whether you are doing something poorly, or you can view whether you're doing something well. And the idea that you envision yourself as the best version of yourself kind of naturally comes through, because if you're performing on a camera, you kind of want to be the best version of yourself, because it's a moment in time that's going to last forever if you keep it. So just an interesting like frame of multiple ideas that I thought I wanted to explore with you. So what are your thoughts around that?
I think you're right. I think that did play a role unconsciously. I wasn't thinking about it consciously while I was doing it, but I think you're absolutely right that there's going to be recorded. So I know I'm going to put this on YouTube, and I have choice over what goes on there and what doesn't. So let me do something that actually looks good, and I'm doing it the right way so that I can put this out and people are actually getting value from it. So I understood that. On top of the fact I was already pretty good, so I knew I wasn't going to mess up, but that definitely probably added an extra element to it.
Yeah. And then I guess you improve quicker.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I also had another note that you made around having your boss share a similar vision to you. From your experience and your understanding of the world today, would you say it's better to keep your visions to yourself or share them with the world around you to try and rally support from people who even like might not be able to help you short term, but just understand where you're at and what you're doing, versus potentially like the idea that you should keep your goals and visions to yourself and work on them internally?
So it's a combination of both, but I lean towards the latter of keeping things to yourself. So the reason why my boss knew that I wanted to be a basketball player is because when he hired me for the job, he asked, what do you want to get out of this job? And I told him, hey, I just played in college. I want to play professional basketball, but I'm not signed right now. So I want to work at this job. So he understood this is not a career for me. It was a job. And he respected that. But I came across good in the interview. I had a good references and all that. And he needed a warm body to sell membership. So we were serving each other's needs.
A warm body to sell membership. So what a sentence. I love that.
Yeah,
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's the sales world. This is what they do. They cycle people. The turnover there is very high. It's like restaurants. So he knew he needed a salesperson, and I sounded like I could sell memberships, and I could sell memberships. I was good. As far as letting people know, the only time I would let people know where I was going and what I was doing is if they asked. So I wasn't not like I was walking around with a big sign on my forehead to say, hey, I'm trying to play pro basketball. I would tell people because they asked me, what are you doing? Who are you? Where you come from? Because people could tell I was relatively young. They could see I was in good shape. They could see I would come to the gym because I'm working at a gym. So I would come to work early and work out, or I would stay after work and work out. And so people could tell that, or they would just having conversation like, Dre, who are you? Where'd you work before this? What you doing? I said, well, I was just in college. I was playing basketball. I'm trying to go play basketball next summer. I'm trying to go to this exposure camp. I would just say, this would just be random conversation I'm having with my coworkers. So that's how they knew. Again, it's not like I was walking around just, hey, you want to know what I'm doing in my future? It wasn't like that. It just came up naturally in the conversation. So even to this day, I'll tell someone who I am and what I do. Let's say I'm in my building. I live in a high rise. I see people all the time. They don't ask me what I do, but eventually after they see me enough times, they may ask. I got to ask you, what do you do? You're always in a suit. Then I tell them what I do. But it's not like it's not like I got a name tag that says, hey, you want to be coached by a business coach? Call me. It's not like that. So if they ask, I tell them. And usually with me, it's always been this way in my life because people see my behavior, or they see the way that I show up, the way I present myself. Eventually they get curious and they'll ask. And when they ask, I tell them. But if they don't ask me anything, I don't tell them anything.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. So do you think there's value in openly sharing your goals and visions, or you think it is a better call to keep it to yourself and just grind in your own space?
Good question. I think it depends on who you are, type of person you are. I'm the type of person who I don't think it would be valuable for me, obviously, because I don't do it. But there are other people who it does work for them. If they go and announce, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Hey, I'm trying to make it to the Olympics, but I need money to pay for my training. And they put the story out the right way, depending on their aura and their energy and their personality. People will get behind it and they'll crowdsource $1 million so they can pay for their training so they can go to the Olympics. Right. So that works for some people. It doesn't work for others. I think it really depends on your personality, and does the behavior match the type of person that you are. I'm not that type of person. But there are people out there for who that would be a perfect process, but I'm not that person.
So it's just a different marketing strategy, basically.
Exactly.
If we bring it back to, the game side of things.
Right. Based on what you're marketing, and you are the person that you're marketing. So every person should know themselves well enough to know, does that work or does it not?
Interesting. I know we spoke about it briefly in our rapid fire, but what do you define as someone who has game, leading into the next kind of part?
Person who has game, first of all, they know what game they're in and they have the ability to perform and produce results in that game.
Okay. So knowing what game you're in, how does somebody do the mental internal study to understand what game they're in and what the rules of the game are and that sort of stuff in an effective way?
Well, there's two ways you can do it. One is through trial and error and experience, and the other one is through talking to someone who already knows the game. And the second one is just a quicker way. That's the faster way. And you mentioned it. I don't know, we were recording when you said that, but you said you had a guest on your show and he gave you some game, right, about how you're doing your show. So that was a shortcut that you might have you might have found that out on your own, but it might have took you 30 episodes. All right. You found it out with him in 2 minutes? He just told you. All right. So sometimes you can just go find someone who's already in the game, who already knows stuff. And this is why I said business is a politocracy. Politics just means connections to other people, positive or negative. And we usually call politics when it's not working. We call it networking when it is working, but it's the same thing. So, and then the other thing is through experience. And experience is you just going and doing it yourself. So a lot of what I learned about the overseas basketball world, I learned through my own personal experience because there was no information out there just to read on the internet or anything like that. Like there are books about it now, but I wrote those books, and everybody else who wrote books just copy my stuff. All right. So I had to get that experience, but I understood how to break things down. That's why I told you when you asked me, this might've been the short episode we did. What's my superpower? Is my ability to take what seems complex and break it down and make it simple, because I can explain things to people. So those are the two ways you can do it. And if you're doing something that really is new and there really is no other information out there, which is becoming less and less common, then you had to go do it. And those are the pioneers who go first. But otherwise, you're stepping into something that someone has done something like it. There's usually something out there you can learn from so you can shorten your learning curve.
Well, just to elaborate on the situation that happened with the other podcast guests, I knew about the teleprompter side of things. So basically the change now is I've got a teleprompter, I've got a better mic, I invested, $500, $600, $700 that I potentially don't have to invest into this project right now. But the point he made and the reason why that point was taken so seriously is because he has a massive podcast, massive successful podcast, had some of the best guests in the world, has been doing it for a very long time. And he turned around and said to me, if you want to be serious about this, you need to improve these things. And I had a moment in time where I stopped and I thought, okay, I've been thinking about getting a teleprompter and going down this route for about a year now, and I just haven't done it. Now I've got a guy who is, if I was to move forward in a couple of years' time, and I'm where he is on his podcast, I'll be stoked. So I thought to myself, and this person's giving me some tips and giving me a clear, actionable step forward. Sure, it's going to cost me some money. It's an investment.
Right.
But if I'm serious about this, then it's a no-brainer.
Right.
And I need to take that fire and that the firecracker up my ass, and I need to go and do it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I did it.
And what it was is, as you just said, it was a person who already has the success that you want telling you something that was already in your head. So it tethered to what you were already thinking, and it just put some rocket fuel on it, hearing it from somebody else. And that's why the connections matter so much, the right people. Yeah,
definitely. So the second part you mentioned was about being somebody who has game is to build the skills in the game. So how did you build those skills?
Which game are we talking about?
Let's keep it generally, but we can go down the specifics of basketball and business, because they're both kind of two pillars that have importance in, potentially someone listening to this. Yes. So I guess to reiterate the question, understanding what game you're in, understanding the rules of the game. You can do that through experience or feedback from other people in the game ahead of you. And then the second part is becoming good enough at said game to be worth any conversations in that game.
Right.
How do you do that? How did you do that?
So developing basketball, nobody really taught me. So I developed most of my basketball skill really self-taught. So I would just go to the park in Philadelphia, where I'm from, outdoor basketball court, and just practice. I would just do stuff randomly that maybe I saw somebody else do, or that I remembered, or I would just kind of make stuff up, or that I just remember someone doing in the games we were playing the previous night. I would just keep practicing until I started to figure things out on my own. So I really developed a lot of my basketball game just by myself, just trying and doing stuff. And then once I got on YouTube and I started to, by that point, I had a pretty solid ability as a pro player. And I just took the stuff that I was teaching, stuff I was giving to the other players, because they all needed the basics, the fundamentals. And I've always understood that you got to master the fundamentals of what you do. I've always just had that discipline of mastering the fundamentals of a thing. I had done it in basketball. So really a lot of the material that I was teaching on YouTube to basketball players was fundamental, basic stuff that it might have looked advanced because I was this big, strong, fast guy who can jump and dunk and do all that stuff. But it was really just a combination of doing the fundamentals. So that's really what I was doing once I understood it. And I came to realize, Adam, that even though what I was teaching was quote unquote only the fundamentals, how few people grasp the fundamentals of anything that they do. So it was actually, I had something that was very valuable, even though from the inside looking out, you may not think is that valuable because you assume everybody has fundamentals, right? As a pro player, most pro players don't have fundamentals. They just, again, this is why I made a clear distinction between the sports world and business world. A lot of pro athletes are just very talented. They're just genetically gifted. You're 7 feet tall and you can jump high. You don't have to be that fundamentally sound. You're always going to get an opportunity. Now, if you're 6 feet and you can't jump high, you better be fundamentally sound because you won't make it if you can't. So that's why in the sports world it's a little bit different. So someone who's successful in sports doesn't really have to be that thorough at what they do. Whereas in business, you must be thorough, at least in serious business. Let me say that. So in the business world, answering your other question, there's a combination of several things. I've always been a sponge. In addition to being able to, I say I was self-taught in basketball. That's also because I could watch somebody else do something, and then the next day I'll go to the court and practice it until I figured it out. So I've always been a sponge when it comes to information and insights. So I got introduced to what I came to know as network marketing in college. And I went to a few of the meetings and I absorbed a lot of what they were saying, because a lot of what they teach in network marketing, I don't know if you have any experience. It's really
multi-level marketing. Is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah, same thing. Okay. Yes. It's basically a crash course in entrepreneurship. That's what it is. And it's 20% of it is talking about the particular product or service that you sell. 80% of it is just helping you understand how entrepreneurship works and the mindset of an entrepreneur. And I recommend, especially people anywhere in the world, if you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, go do any type of multi-level marketing for 6 months. And you don't have to stay.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because you get a crash course in entrepreneurship and you get a crash course in personal development. And the reason why I'm an entrepreneur and I talk about personal development is because of my experience in network marketing. That's absolute fact. So it starts there. And I was a big sponge there. And by the way, I have a 4-year business degree from a university, and nothing that I learned in that business degree taught me anything about being an entrepreneur. Zero. So I got it all from network marketing. And then once I'm online, so about that 2009, 2010 period, there was a period where I found myself unemployed from basketball, but I have this audience on YouTube. I just read Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Workweek. And
I love that guy.
Yeah, I was reading his blog, and on his blog, he said, well, if you want to sell a product on the internet, here's a little experiment that you can test out if there's a market for it and how to create it and sell it. I went and found and followed his process.
Do you remember the process?
Yeah, I remember. You want me to tell you?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So, all right. Step one was you go and get this. So first of all, figure out what it is you think you want to sell. So I had an audience of basketball players who were always asking me to give them ways to continue practicing basketball the way that I practice. And I would always tell them, I can't make a custom program for each one of you. It's too many people. And somebody said, well, why don't you just take what you already do and just put it into a format where everybody else can do it too? I said, okay, I would do that, but I would charge you for it. And they said, as long as it's not too much money. This is all in the YouTube comments that this conversation is happening. So Tim Ferriss says, okay, step one is you go and get yourself a free one-page hosting platform on this site called Weebly, which is still exists to this day, Weebly. And it's not one page, but it was like a free version of a hosting site. Then he said, what you do is you mock up this little website, and there's only going to be 2 pages. So on the first page, you just put your product, whatever your product is called. You can get a little photo, something that represents it, and put the name of the product, give a little description of what it does, and then put a button that says, buy this product for, and put the price, whatever you're going to sell it for. And then on the second page, you put when they click the button, because it already says the price. So that means someone wants to buy this. On the second page, you put this product is under construction, but as soon as it's ready, we'll let you know. Put your email address in this box and hit submit. And as soon as it's ready, we'll email you. So Tim said you go to Google AdWords. This is Google's advertising platform. You put in $5. You buy the keyword that is related to your product and you send traffic to, he didn't call it traffic, but you send people to that page. And now, disclaimer for everybody listening to this in 2024 and beyond, you cannot do this with $5. These days, you might need 500, but back then you could do it for $5. So I did it with $5, and it was just on basketball training. So what I did was make 2 programs: one, simple to advanced ball handling, that's dribbling the basketball; the other one for shooting the basketball. 2 products, 7-day programs that were based off videos that I had already made and I had on YouTube. I just organized them and put them into a system, and I put explanations with the videos. That's all I did. That was my product. I made these products in one day. And
how much was the product?
I'm going to tell you that part. So I made the website, and the button said, buy this product for $4.99. That was my first 2 products, $4.99. I sent traffic through Google AdWords to these platforms. As he said, don't send it to people who already know you, because they might say that they'll buy it or they'll click the buttons just because they like you. You got to send people who don't know you to get real proof of market viability. That's why you got to do the ads and not just talk to your fans. So I did exactly what he said. I did the ads, and people who didn't know me click the button and they put their email address in. So once I got a couple email addresses from randoms, I said, okay, I'm going to make the product. I went and made the product. I went and emailed the randoms back, and I made a video on YouTube that said, hey, I got a new product. Oh, you've been asking me, how can you train like me? Go to this website, buy the program. I made a sale that first night. I had a BlackBerry phone. Did you ever have a BlackBerry back in the day?
No, I was a bit, how old are you?
Okay, 42.
Okay, I'm 32 this year,
Okay,
so I'm a bit behind on the BlackBerry.
Yeah, you're iPhone baby.
Yeah, just
Nokia
and iPhone.
Yes, so I got an iPhone now. So anyway, the BlackBerry phone, there was a little red light that would blink when you got an email or a text. So the light blinks and says, congratulations, you made a sale for $4.99. And when I made that sale, I said to myself, Adam, I said I could do this for the rest of my life. What I had just done was I had created intellectual property. Didn't know that phrase back then, but I know it now. And that was basically taking an idea out of your head, turning it into something tangible and real, putting a price tag on it and selling it, exchanging it for money. I said, I got a bunch of ideas. I was only selling 2 of them at that point for $5 a piece. I said, I got more ideas than this, and I could easily do this. And that's when I realized, okay, this is how, because remember, if you go back in our interview here, I said back 2008, I said to myself, this internet thing is going to be bigger than basketball for me. Well, this is when I realized how. I said, okay, I can make money doing this, even if I never play basketball again. Because remember, I did this experiment because I was looking. Because at this point, I was unemployed from basketball. The phone was not ringing. I was a free agent waiting for the phone to ring. So that's why I was so looking. And that's why I so quickly and urgently executed on what Tim said. So when I made those sales, I said, okay, all right, if I never sign another contract again, I'm good. Luckily, the phone rang again. I kept playing until 2015. But from 2010 to 2015, now I got this internet audience. YouTube got purchased by Google. So now I'm making ad revenue from YouTube. I'm selling my products, selling my programs. I'm just using YouTube as a lead source. I'm not running any ads. I never ran any ads. That $5 is all I spent on ads for the next 10 years. And I'm just using YouTube as a lead source. And self-publishing became a thing. So I started writing my own books. And I'm playing basketball professionally. So from 2010 to 2015, that's when I kind of laid the foundation for what I do now.
You're a busy man. You wouldn't have been doing much else.
Right.
Just grinding. Exactly. Nice. The out of curiosity, with the online products, you don't have to answer, but how much did you make on those $4.99 products in the end?
Well, we made a whole bunch more. So these days on that website, we probably have 100 different products for sale. Yeah. I don't really even push that one that much these days. It's basketball related and ball players don't really know.
But they're still there?
Yeah, it's still there. But it was 6 figures a year just on selling those products, because I was just using YouTube videos as lead sources. So from that 2010 to 2015 period, what happened, Adam, was you were able to, I had a whole bunch of traffic of people watching me on YouTube, because it wasn't so many people creating content, but everybody was consuming content. So there was less competition, and it was before YouTube flipped the algorithm. So they changed the algorithm about 2015 to penalize people like me who were sending people off YouTube to other websites. And when they flipped the algorithm, that's when it started hitting me. But by that point, I was out of basketball, and I'd already made what I needed to make, and I was already on to other things. So thank you, YouTube.
Great. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
On this note, I'm curious because my head is in the online product world right now. If you were to start an online product again today, using similar principles to what you did with Tim Ferriss, but relevant to 2024 and beyond, what would that step-by-step process be?
You mean as far as what I would sell or how I would sell it?
The frameworks around how you would sell it, basically how you did the step-by-step process of $5 landing page. What would that look like right now?
I would do something similar. I would start with something very basic as far as whatever's on a website, something to sell.
What would you use? What platform?
I probably use ClickFunnels.
Okay. Why do you like ClickFunnels?
I like ClickFunnels because it literally is the best funneling software. So you can sell something and upsell and upsell and upsell. So, I mean, there's a bunch of software that does funnels, but I like ClickFunnels. I like Russell stuff. So Russell Brunson is the guy who created ClickFunnels. So I would use that and I would create something very basic as far as a sales page and landing page, and then upsell, and confirmation page. And the product these days, I would probably go with something based around what I talk about now. So mindset, personal development, something like that I could really establish my niche, establish myself as a person in a niche. And I would use some form of content as my lead source. Same way that I did with YouTube and basketball. These days, I might use Instagram, or I might use a podcast, or I might use, I don't know, whatever other platform, TikTok, who knows? Just something where I can start to build up an audience. And now people start to know me, and this is this guy, he does this, he talks about this. And then I would just start sending people over to that site to buy stuff.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. So you mentioned you learned a lot about being an effective entrepreneur through the network marketing business.
Yes.
What are the top 5? What are the key 5 pillars of an effective entrepreneur?
Nobody ever asked that one. Key 5 pillars. Let me see if I can narrow it down to 5. First of all, you have to be able to sell. Now, an entrepreneur is a salesperson by definition, because an entrepreneur by definition is a person who starts a business enterprise while taking on greater than normal risk financially. And the risk sometimes is not just the money that you put up front, but also the money that you are losing by opportunity cost because you don't have a job. So, or the job that you're not doing while you're doing your entrepreneurial stuff. So you have to be able to sell. That's number one. You must be able to sell as an entrepreneur. Secondly, an entrepreneur has to be a great communicator, because you have to communicate to your audience. If you want to get people to support you or get people to join you and work for you, you have to be able to communicate with them your vision, what you're doing, and what you want them to do, if anything. That's the second thing. Third thing, an entrepreneur has to have a very strong stomach, because you are taking on greater than normal risk. See, because you can just get a job, right? All right. You can just get a job. And at least you know you got a check coming every 2 weeks. You might hate the job, but at least you know the check is coming. As an entrepreneur, there's no check. If the check's coming, it's because you sold something. But you don't know when the check is coming. And you got to take money out of your pocket and time out of your life to build into this business that you don't know if you're going to get a return on that investment. So if you don't have a strong stomach, this game is absolutely not for you. So that's number 3. Number 4. You have to be good at leveraging relationships and connecting with other people. And the reason why this matters is because it goes against the grain of the way that we're taught. So I don't know how they teach over in Australia, Adam, but here in the United States, the system that we come up in through the educational system is all based on everything is about you and what you know and what you can hold in your head. That's what it's based on. So when you go to school, if there's a test and you look at your neighbor's paper, if me and you are in the same class and I look at your paper during the test, I'm cheating, quote unquote, and I fail the test and I might get kicked out of school. Whereas in the business world, if you are doing everything just based on your own knowledge and your own effort, you will probably soon go out of business. In the business world, you need to connect with the person next door and the person over here and the person across town. And you need to look in every book you can find. Also in school, they have most of the time is a closed book test. So if there's a test in school and you get caught looking at the textbook, you're cheating and you fail and you get kicked out of school. Whereas in the business world, when you have a question that you can't answer, the first thing you do is start looking in books and getting information and talking to people who already know what you don't know. If you do that in school, you're cheating and you fail. So it's the exact opposite of how the educational system teaches us. And this is the reason why it's one of my 5 points here that you're asking, is because it goes against the grain of the way most people have been taught and the way most people are hardwired. And it's very hard for people to undo that hardwiring, especially once they become adults. And if I had to pick one more, so we said selling, communicating, connecting. I forgot what the 4th one was that I gave. If you remember, tell me.
I think it was 3. But we can do 4.
Okay, so selling, communicating, networking. The next one is asking the right question. And that goes connecting to what I just said. You got to be able to ask the right question as an entrepreneur. What I call this is insight, not information, but insight. And a lot of times when I'm talking to people, Adam, they say, well, Dre, I want to do this. I want to start a course, or I want to write a book, or I want to start a coaching program. I just need someone to give me the information on how to do it. And I'm like, you don't need information, because if all you need is information, you go on YouTube. Why are you talking to me? You go on YouTube and get information. You go on Google or Chat GPT, and it'll give you all the information you need to do exactly what you said. What people actually need is insight. And insight is information, but it's information interpreted properly. So properly interpreted information means you walk into a library, there are 10,000 books. Okay, you have access to all this information. Which book do you open? Which page do you turn to? And where and how and why do you apply which information at what time and for what reason? That's insight. An entrepreneur needs to be good at insight, or you need to get someone on your team who's good at insight, one or the other. And the fifth thing an entrepreneur has to be is a visionary, because you are seeing things that do not exist. That's what entrepreneur is doing. Now, again, when you work at a job, it exists. All you got to do is sit there and do what we said. When you're an entrepreneur, you are creating the vision of something that may not even exist yet. And you have to sell other people on that in order to get them behind you and get on board. And you must hold to that vision in your mind. This goes back to the strong stomach point. The strong stomach was the other thing I said for entrepreneur.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I'll give you 6 here. So the vision of the entrepreneur has to be held in the mind of that person, even when nothing in their reality says that this vision is going to happen. So there you go.
So you have a vision, but also crazy people have visions like that. So it's funny, maybe that you got to be a little bit crazy.
Absolutely. So speaking of mentioning ClickFunnels, Russell Brunson, who's a ClickFunnels guy, he has that as part of the it's like the mantra of ClickFunnels. It's a long thing, but he basically took it from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs from Apple. And
yeah, of course, yeah.
When Apple came out, I believe it was in a 1984 ad, he talked about that. Here's to the crazies, the people who just have this wild vision in their mind and nobody else can see, but they believe it strongly enough that they're crazy enough to go make it happen. I'm paraphrasing, but yes, you have to be crazy to be an entrepreneur.
I mean, it's a good thing. The crazies are the ones who make the difference in the world.
That's right.
For sure. So I want to double click on the strong stomach. If you don't have a strong stomach, how can you build that?
How can you build a strong stomach?
Yeah.
Getting punched in it several times. That's the first thing.
That's it.
Yeah, it's funny because I was in the gym yesterday and I was sparring with this other guy and I hit him a couple times I hit him a couple body shots. He hit me with a couple. And as long as you can keep standing, all right, that's really what it is. So the strong stomach part is also related to mental toughness, and mental toughness cannot be built until you're in a tough situation. You can't be mentally tough if everything's easy. Mental toughness means you have to be in situations that are actually challenging, and you have to still be standing when those situations end. And the biggest thing to build mental toughness is people have to be willing to voluntarily put themselves in challenging situations so they can build mental toughness on purpose rather than having it happen by happenstance, such as some random thing happens and it just interrupts your life and now you got to deal with it, but you didn't know it was coming. Is better if you put yourself in mentally challenging situations and tough situations that you were not expecting to be in, and you choose to step into it anyway. So similar to you, like you said, you had a guest on your show and he challenged you by telling you, hey, if you want to be serious about this, here's what you need to do. That was he was challenging you. That's a tough situation because you weren't thinking about doing it, at least not yet. But because he said it, it kind of moved you to do something. So that challenge that came from someone else who's already a high level person moves you to do something. So if I wanted to be a fighter, for example, what I got to do is get in the ring with somebody who has the ability to knock my head off, and I got to get in the ring anyway. All right. If that's what I wanted to do, if that's the game that you want to be in. So you got to put yourself in those challenging situations. I remember they asked Kobe Bryant, they asked him about, how do you survive when you go from high school to the NBA and you want to make it? Because a lot of players who did that did not make it. And then Kobe Bryant said, sink or swim. That's what it is. You got to sink or you swim. They throw you in the deep end of the pool and you're either going to drown or you're going to learn how to swim. But those are the only two options when you jump into the deep end of the pool. And most people won't jump into the deep end of the pool because they're afraid of the failure part. But the people who jump in and they survive, those are the ones who become the legends and the successes.
The core of it is really just being willing to get beaten up, right? That's it. Just be willing to get beaten up and embrace those moments where instead of it being a fearful thought, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to level up. It's an opportunity to do better and, take that next step forward. Yes. So it's really just still being, so I guess strong stomach is you're still afraid, but you still move forward.
Yes. And it's funny. I was just reading this email from, I'm sure you've heard of Andrew Tate. You familiar with his work? I was reading his email from him. I'm on his email list, and he was just talking about this just the other day. He was saying that a lot of people aren't willing to act unless they're sure that the path in front of them is safe. But, and this is something that I've talked about many times to my audience, is that, Adam, if you want to be successful, you have to risk failure, because there is no such thing as a perfect scenario in life. There are only trade-offs. Everything in life has a trade-off. Even things that look amazing from the outside looking in, when you get on the inside, you realize it's not as perfect as it seems. There's a trade-off for it. It's just a matter of what trade-off are you willing to make. So if you want to be a great boxer, for example, since we're talking about that, you have to be willing to get in the ring with someone who can beat you up and you beat them up. But if you don't risk getting beat up, you can't beat anybody else up, because you can't get close enough to hit somebody unless they're close enough to hit you. All right, that's just the way it works. All right, you get far enough away that they can't hit you, you can't hit them either. So nothing happens, right? There's two guys shadow boxing. So this is the way life is. And if you want to get into entrepreneurship, you are taking on the risk of losing your time and your money and your shirt going after that business in order to get the win of being a successful business person who everybody looks at and says, wow, look at that successful guy who built a business. But if you don't take the risk, then you cannot get the reward. And the challenge most people have is that they minimize their risk, therefore minimizing their possibility of reward.
Is there a clever way to take risk?
Yes.
Or does it have to be completely...
shoot from the hip? Go for broke. No, it doesn't have to be that all the time. And there are ways you can minimize your risk. For example, when Richard Branson he wanted to start a plane company. He went to a company and said, let me borrow the plane for a certain amount of time. He put it in a contract. If we're not successful within this amount of time, I can give you the plane back and I don't owe you anything. So there are ways you can reduce your risk if we're talking like by the letter of what I'm saying. I'm really saying that directionally, that the spirit of what I'm saying is that if you don't risk failing, you can't win. And that's the way that it works. So is there a way that you can reduce your risk? Of course, you can reduce your risk in business by go get a mentor who already knows business, who can help solve your unsolved mysteries and answer your questions so that you can get an answer in 30 minutes rather than taking 30 days to figure something out. So there are ways that you can reduce your risk. But again, there's still going to be some discomfort that comes with that, because you might have to pay that mentor. They may tell you to do something. If you don't do it within 48 hours, they won't take your calls anymore. So there's still a trade-off. Everything has a trade-off. And anyone who thinks you're looking at a situation that has no trade-offs, that simply means you don't know as much about the situation as you think you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I appreciate your time. And I think I'd like to explore some general philosophical components before we wrap up. What views do you have that would make people either scratch their head or potentially become angry right now?
People get too excited, getting negative about Donald Trump.
Yeah. What do you think it is?
What I think it is. So we have a whole conversation just on that alone. I think, number one, Donald Trump has taken the elevator where most people climb the ladder in life, period. In business, he took the elevator, meaning first of all, he invested in real estate in New York when nobody wanted to be in New York. You're in New York right now. New York then in the late 80s and the early 90s was not what it is now. It was not a place you want to hang out. It was not a place you wanted to be after dark. Didn't want to be in New York. And a lot of people don't know that. And he invested in New York. He put his name on the line, and he didn't always have to use his own money because he knew how to negotiate. But he put his business and money on the line to invest in New York when no one wanted to, which is why he was able to get such great deals. And then when New York became New York, now everybody's like, oh, well, Donald Trump did this and that. Like, where were you when he was investing in it? That you weren't around. So that's one thing in the business world. And the political world, obviously, he jumped straight to the biggest job in the country without any political experience. And a lot of people don't like that. And he did it successfully. He went straight to the top. And the other thing is, a lot of times he speaks, if you listen to him talk, he's a salesman. He speaks directionally, not literally. So people who don't, when you don't like a person, you take everything they say literally, you dissect their words and use their words out of context against them, was what people do with Trump. But when you like someone, you take what they say directionally. So when he says something like build a wall, what he's saying is we're going to enforce our borders and enforce our immigration laws, not we're literally going to build a Great Wall of China in Texas. That's not what he meant. What he means is we're going to enforce our borders. And again, when you like a person, you understand the spirit of their point rather than the letter of their point. And because people have become so emotionalized by Trump, it's because his enemies has taken the emotional points to trigger people. Race, sex, immigration, those things, people get very emotionally triggered about them. They can't think about those topics logically. So it's an easy thing to use against them. That's why.
Okay. That makes sense. So on that note, I mean, from your experience, have you dealt with people who take you literally as opposed to directionally?
Yeah, of course. So if I bring up Donald Trump, that happens.
What are some strategies to handle those people, but still also maintain equanimity and also get your point across without it becoming a fight?
A great question. Well, the first thing is I have the ability to articulate and explain what I just explained. So because I have the ability to explain it, people can get it and they get what I'm saying. And often I'll say it, I'll get all of this said before they get a chance to respond. And usually that shuts them up before they say anything because I have the ability to explain it. Whereas some people don't have the ability to explain it. So they end up getting in the weeds with these folks. So for me, and I've had people in my audience even say this to me, and they don't say specifically what they're talking about. They'll say, Dre, I don't even agree with everything that you say, but I respect the way that you break it down and explain it. I like the fact that you gave a reason why you feel how you feel and that you're breaking it down and explaining it. And because I'm able to be dispassionate about these topics, like I'm not emotionally engaged in any of the stuff where these things that I'm talking about and social issues, I really don't care which direction it goes. So therefore I can listen to someone who disagrees with me and I don't get mad at them. I can beat up your point all day, but I'm not mad at you as a person just because you have a different opinion from me.
You made an interesting point that I'd also like to explore a little bit further, which was you're not effectively tied to the outcome of any of this either way.
Exactly.
How have you gotten to a point of dispassion in these situations when, let's just use an example, like there's a lot of hatred for him because of like the taking the abortion bills back to the states as opposed to a federal thing. One example. And the argument is that this person is bad for the world because he takes away my rights. But effectively, I'm not saying that as a fact.
No, I get what you mean. Yes.
What I'm saying is, there's also been narratives around like the African American community and how he's bad for the African American community. That's right. You're sitting here saying, I don't care either direction it goes. So what's the thought process around how you accept what is going to happen in the world when it still may affect you one way or another, also like maintain that locus of control internally?
Excellent question. So first of all, when it comes to the abortion thing, the first thing me and you both had to accept is that we're not females. So it doesn't affect us as directly as it would affect a female who's hearing the same thing, because it may affect literally her situation and her choices. Now, when it comes to that subject alone, I would say to people, and this is something I say to men all the time, to be clear, I say this to heterosexual men all the time: do not have unprotected sex with a woman that you're not marrying or planning to marry. Yeah. Therefore, you don't have to worry about this. All right, so the abortion thing doesn't matter. And I know way too many men who have made this mistake and either got an STD or an unwanted baby because they were being stupid. And I will tell those men to their faces, like, you're being a damn idiot. You have unprotected sex with a woman you don't want to marry. What are you doing? Like, that shouldn't have happened. All right, so you shouldn't have to worry about abortion. All right, so with that topic out the way, then when it comes to the other thing, let's just talk about who wins the 2024 election. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but who's going to win the election? The reason that I can be dispassionate about it is because, first of all, I understand that no matter who I vote for, they might not win. So I could campaign for whoever I want. They might not win. Doesn't matter who I vote for. So I don't have any control over the outcome. So and I said this, by the way, for the record, before the 2020 election, when it was Biden against Trump. I put an episode out the day of the election, and I said, here's what all of you need to understand about the election. The most important point was this: what happens in your house is more important than what's happening in the White House. And that's a mindset that what you do personally and how you are operating as an individual, you need to make that the priority and the most important part of your life, paramount to your success, rather than what's happening in the government. I'm not saying that what happened in the government does not affect you, because it could. It can affect me. The taxes may go up, may go down. They may change the laws in some way, shape, or form. Housing prices, who knows, inflation, whatever. All those things do affect me. But my decision about Dre Baldwin being successful and the people around me being successful is more important than anything that anybody in the government can do to me or to affect me. That's a mindset that I have. And that's about taking personal ownership, which is one of the principles of what working your game is about. So that's how I'm able to reconcile that.
Makes sense. So, okay, well, moving on to the next question. What is the biggest thing over the last 2 years that you've changed your mind on?
Great question. Biggest thing over the last 2 years. So it's 2024. We would go back to 2022. Biggest thing that I've changed my mind on. That's a really good question. What have I changed my mind on over the last 2 years? I think the biggest thing that I changed my mind on is, for me personally, is that I need to, even more than before, is not even so much changing my mind, but I've gone even further. I've become more extreme on this, is that as a man, as a head of household, everything is my responsibility. Everything happening under this roof is my responsibility when it comes to kids, when it comes to spouse, when it comes to their happiness, their sustenance, them being taken care of. Everything comes back to me, even if it's not my fault. It becomes my responsibility. And I'm kind of cheating on that, Adam, because I've always talked about that. I've always said those kind of things, but it becomes really even more real. What'd you say?
It's really coming home now.
Yes, it becomes more real when there are real challenges at home. When everybody else is being challenged, everybody else is challenged and you're not, but you're the person. So everything comes back to you. So that I've become even more strong in that and even more of a believer in it since then. But as far as, I'm not sure there's anything that I've completely flipped on, because I think for the most of the time I'm right. But for the most part, I don't think I've flipped on anything, but I've become stronger in some of these positions.
Makes sense. I'm noticing a potential analogy to, my experience in business, where it feels like things are not my fault, but they are my problem.
Absolutely.
To resolve and work through. And I recently saw a piece of content that said that on average, I think it was Alex Hormozi was talking about it. He said that single men make less money than married men, who make less money than married men with children on average, because the skill sets internally, like taking control of the household and the problems in the household and solving them, are skill sets potentially that are very, very relevant and important on like a mental basis, as well as kind of delivering good outcomes in a business. And also you've got things outside of your individual, you're working for things outside of yourself now. You're motivated by more than just your own pleasure and success, which I think as a man really pushes you to a level that you couldn't otherwise reach internally. Yes. Just to know, what are your thoughts around that?
That makes perfect sense. I was just putting this stack together when you said it. Single men, married men with kids. Absolutely. 100% agree with that, because, and the second part I think is the most important part. Yes, there is a skill development of, you got to deal with the family and the wife and all this juggling and then the business. But I think even bigger than that, and over here, mindset is the foundation of everything we do. That when you are responsible for people who can't be responsible for themselves, like your kids, and you are responsible for a woman who has decided to get behind you because you're running an enterprise in which you're taking on risks. No matter how successful your business is today, it might drop tomorrow, right? And now everybody is betting on you. So that's that drive that a man has internally to make sure that he holds everything up, because everything is on his shoulders, definitely leads to higher levels of performance. So I'm 100% on board with that.
It's like getting punched in the face and coming back.
Right. Well, you can't lay down. You can't stay down, because everything else falls if you fall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's very powerful. What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Kindest thing anyone's ever done to me.
You can't use your parents.
Can't use my parents. All right, perfect.
You have to use a specific example that isn't your parents.
Sure. So we talk about getting into business. So I told you about 2015, I stopped playing. In 2014, I met a woman. Her name's Donna St. Louis. She was my first mentor, like personal mentor when it comes to business. Now, I told you about the multi-level marketing thing years earlier, but she was my first personal mentor in business. She is a professional speaker. And at that time, she already was a full-time professional speaker, meaning she was making a full-time income from doing speaking gigs and consulting, that type of stuff. Basically what I wanted to do. And she just showed me the ropes. And so I remember I met her. She lived not far from where I was, north of Miami. She said, meet me at this Starbucks. So we met at the Starbucks. She said, we'll meet for 30 minutes. And we go to the Starbucks. I had my laptop with me so I could take notes on everything she was saying. So I've always been a big note taker. I told you I'm a sponge. Right? People give me information, I take it in. So I'm taking notes as she's talking. The 30-minute meeting lasted 3 hours. And it's not because I was dazzling her with my eloquence. So for the most part, I was just listening. I was just asking questions and letting her talk. And she could see that I was absorbing it. And she saw that I was taking notes. And at one point she stopped talking and said, is this stuff useful to you? And I said, yeah, look, I'm taking notes. And I showed it to her. I had like 10 pages of notes in Evernote that I'm taking notes while she's talking. And the reason I'm bringing that up is to help people understand that the best way that you can pay back someone who is giving you, let's say, information or insight is to actually apply it and use it. That's how you pay them back. It's not with money. Because often if they're the person up here, you're down here, you don't have enough money to pay them. It's that you apply what they said. And when you apply it and you use it and you create success, what you're doing is validating that what they know is actually useful. And you become a success story of their information. And that's the kindest thing anybody ever did for me, because I took a lot of what she said, the foundations of it became the business that I have today. And that was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, great. And if you could only recommend one book, podcast, or experience for somebody to read or do, and that is the only piece of personal growth that they can do to have the most impact on their life, what would it be?
Well, I already brought up the 48 Laws of Power, so we won't use that again.
Is that the one? Well, it can be. If that's the one, it's the one.
Well, what type of person is it? What situation are they in?
Just general, like something that's general enough, regardless of industry.
Person? Okay. So, well, we won't use 48 Laws again. You should read the 48 Laws, anybody watching this. But the other one I'll give you is The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. And the Law of Success is, everybody knows Napoleon Hill for Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich was within The Law of Success. The Law of Success is a bigger book. Think and Grow Rich was just pulled out of it, and he called it Think and Grow Rich and made it a separate book. But The Law of Success is basically the encyclopedia baseline for personal growth and personal development, at least as far as what I first came across when it comes to personal growth, personal development, is that book, The Law of Success, basically an encyclopedia of personal development.
Okay. And why?
Well, everything you need to know about mindset, discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative, performance, producing results, taking responsibility, personal ownership, all of it is covered inside the Law of Success. If you get the audio, I have the audio book. Actually, you can probably find the audio book online because it's out of print. This is over 100 years old, this book. And the audio, I believe, is like 25 hours long. It's a very long book, but it's everything you need to know about development. That's why I recommend that book. So anybody who's serious about learning everything is in that book.
Nice. And what is, this would be my last question for you. So like, what is the, sorry, let me start again. If you could know the absolute truth to one question, what would it be?
The absolute truth to one question. Where'd they bury Jimmy Hoffa? Is he under the New York Jets stadium? No.
That's fine.
No. No. Number one question, what happens after you die? Is there anything? Does it just go blank and is over, or is there something that happens afterwards?
Well, on that note, what do you think the meaning of life is?
I think the meaning of life is to use your free will and use the talents that you were given by your higher being, whoever that is to you, to their maximum potential, and get the most out of yourself from what you've been given and what you've developed.
Nice. Thank you, Dre. So is there anything you're excited about at the moment you want to let listeners in on before we close up?
The thing that has most of our attention right now is Work on Your Game University. That's where we work with our high level people. We do our coaching, consulting, trainings. That's what we're focused on as a university.
Okay. And where can people find you if they're interested?
You can find me online on every social platform, whichever one you prefer. If you're active on, I'm most active probably on Instagram at Dre Baldwin, but I'm active on every platform. Every day we post something. So I'm easy to find anywhere online. Everything's public.
Awesome. Thank you, Dre. I appreciate your time and energy. It's been a really good conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Hope you have too.
Well, thank you for having me on, Adam. I really appreciate the questions, the thought you put into them, and I appreciate you sharing your platform.
Of course. And to anyone who's made it to the end of this podcast, if you could subscribe, give us a rating, let us know your thoughts on the Q&A on Spotify or the comments on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.